Peter, you last talk.
Thank you very much. I'm going to talk about this wretched Brexit thing. But first of all, I'm going to look at a little bit of voting theory. And here we go. So first of all, I want you to have a look at that second website address. And if you've got everybody has a smartphone these days, so can you just have a look at that second website address and log in. So you have to give your email, and we are at the end of the evening we'll do an electronic vote. So yeah, you just log in, you put in your email, and then we vote. Borda Institute is now 23 years old. Okay. So we start on voting. And voting, as you know, is pretty old. It was first used in China during the Han Dynasty. It wasn't used by very many. It was actually used in the imperial court by the empress ministers. Normally, he would go along with whatever decision they took. He was actually, as you know, China invented pretty well everything. But on this particular one, the Greeks beat them to it by a century or so. And they were using majority voting, a little bit earlier, century or two earlier. And then the first person to realize that binary voting might have its limitations was Pliny the Younger, and that was in AD 105. But nobody did anything about multi-option voting until the Chinese in the 1197. The Chinese are always ahead of everything. And this was in the Jin Dynasty. And they didn't use it very often, but it was a 3-option vote. And it wasn't just a question of do we fight the Mongolians, yes or no, but they had a 3rd option as well. So I'm going to look at pluralism, yes, multi-option voting. So the minimum plural society would be 3 persons with 3 different opinions. So let's take Miss I, Miss J, and Miss K, and let's assume that Miss I wants A, Miss J wants B, and Miss K wants C. So if we take a majority vote on A, it loses by 1 to 2, and same on B, and same on C. So yes, if there's no majority for any one thing, there's a majority against everything, which is Brexit. I mean, there were, well, we'll come on to Brexit in a minute, but this does actually sum up Brexit. And if Boris Johnson, who's meant to be educated, would read a little bit of Pliny the Younger, it might have been better. So, if we're going to look at these three people with these three preferences, with these three first preferences, we can't get an answer by majority voting. So let us have a look at what are their preferences. So Ms. I, first preference A, second preference B, third preference C, Mr. J, B, C, A, and Ms. K, C, A, B. All very simple stuff. And if you take majority voting, then because we have three options, we'll have to have two votes. So if we start with A versus B, and then the one on the left and the one on the right, they both prefer A to B, and only the one in the middle prefers C to A, so A wins versus B. And then A versus C, well, the two people on the right both prefer C to A, so the answer is C. Jolly good, unless we do it this way, and if you start with C versus A, then you finish up to the answer B, and if you start with B versus C, you finish up with the answer A. So if you do rely on majority voting with three options, then the answer could be either A or B or C, depending on the order of voting, which is why the position of chair is always fairly important, and a chairperson can get away with murder sometimes. But you actually have the situation where if you read the top line, A is more popular than B, which is more popular than C, which is more popular than A, which is more popular, and you go round and round in circles forever. And this was first noted by the Marquis de Condorcet, but an awful lot of politicians pretend that it doesn't exist. Okay. Now I'm going to go a little bit further. And it's partly because of that paradox of voting that when it comes to debates, you have a distinct set of rules in the way things should be done. So if we have a motion, which we will call option A, and this is, again, it's a very simple exercise, then somebody suggests a first amendment, option B, if it's accepted. Somebody suggests a second amendment, option C, and if none of these, either the motion unamended or the motion amended, if they all fail, then it's the status quo ante, which will be option D. So we have four options. And if we rely on majority voting, so it's an option X, yes or no type question, then it's either 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to 2, or 0 to 3. So that's not very good. So let's have a look at their preferences. And we start off with this, just as an example. Now the rules state that the first thing to do is to have a look at which amendment you want. So that would be B versus C. Once we've sorted that out, we can decide whether we want to amend the option A, and then we get the substantive, as it's called, and then we have a final decision. Do we take that or do we not? And do we have the status quo ante or do we have something new? So according to this, if we have B versus C, well, Miss I and Mr. J both prefer B to C, so the answer is B. That is the more popular amendment. So then the question is, well, do we amend option A, yes or no? And Miss I and Miss K both prefer A to B, so the answer is A. And then we have the final vote. A is the substantive, and we vote between A and D, and the two people on the right both prefer D to A, so the answer is D. Okay, now it's a very intelligent audience. Oh no, sorry, get back on please. What's wrong? It's option D by 67%. But what is wrong? Okay, I'll tell you, all three of them prefer C to D. Miss I prefers C to D, Mr. J prefers C to D, Miss K prefers C to D. They all prefer C to D. So if you rely on majority voting, in some instances, like this one, you actually get the wrong answer. It's not just a little bit inaccurate, it's wrong, it's hopeless, it's useless, it's absolutely ridiculous that we are still relying on this crazy methodology. But this is why we have these rules. So we say, okay, we'll sort the amendment out first, and then we'll go to the substantive, and then we'll take the. If we didn't have those rules, if we started with A versus B or something, you get a different answer. And it's a crazy world that we live in. But there we are. So if you don't have option X, yes or no, you could have option X or option Y. And if we look at it this way, then A is more popular than B by 2 to 1. And C is more popular than A by 2 to 1. And D to A 2 to 1. And B to C, and B to D, and C to D. So the winner is either, well, depending on which majority vote you've taken. So you have another paradox of voting. And A is more popular than B, and here we go. Yes. We have A is more popular than B, more popular than C, more popular than D, and we go round and round forever. So, again, if you have a paradox, then, okay, and I've chosen the example because there is a paradox, but when there is a paradox, majority voting is no good. And you have the situation where, as in Brexit, you have got an answer, but there is a majority against that answer, because there's a majority against every answer, because it's a crazy way of doing things. Okay. So now I'm going to look at a slightly different scenario, and this is with 9 voters, again, just 3 options, but slightly different. But again, we have no majority. So again, you would have, if you did rely on majority voting, you would have, sorry, back one, you would have a majority of 5 or 6 or 7 against A or B or C. So again, we have to resort to their preferences. And on this occasion, it's like this. So, and this is different from the previous example. And if we look at this carefully, then we see that A, well, you've got some people in favour who think it's the best, but 5 people think it's the worst. So then we go to B, and B is it's a bit mixed, some okay, some poor. And then we go to C, and C, well, it's only 2 best preferences, but it's the second preference of everybody else. So probably C is the option which best represents the consensus of these 9 voters. But when we use a plurality vote, we ignore second and third preferences, and the winner is A, which is a crazy way of doing things, and it's, in electoral terms, it's called first past the vote. In 2-round voting, which is what they have in France and a few other places, then you just look at the 2 leading options from the first round, which is A and B, and then you ignore the preferences cast for C, and you take a second vote between A and B, and if everybody's preferences stay the same, you now have 5 people preferring B to A, so the answer is B on 5. And if you take a point system of voting, which was first advocated over 800 years ago, but we still haven't got round to talking about it, let alone adopting it. And it's 3 points preferred, 2%, 1 preferred. So every preference cast by every voter is taken into account. And it's called the modified vote account. And the winner is now C, which is what it should be anyway. So basically, as with the previous example, where the winner could be A or B or C, depending upon the order of voting, now the winner could be A or B or C, depending which voting system is used, but all three voting systems are called totally democratic for some extraordinary reason. Sorry, no, you have back in. So this is a small graph, if you like, or whatever, of quite a few of the different decision-making systems that there are in the world. I have another one for electoral system. The electoral system becomes more complicated because sometimes you're not making one decision. You might be electing quite a few persons with a proportional representation. But on the left you have binary voting. The question is closed, it's yes or no, black or white, no compromise, no nothing. And then as you move along the bottom axis, the x-axis, the voter gets more choice as you move to the right. And then if they're casting lots of preferences, as on the extreme right, then you can count all those preferences. But if they're only casting one preference, then you can only count the first preference. So the graph has a natural diagonal, and the worst systems in the world are in the bottom left-hand corner, with the UK leading the charge, and the best systems in the world are Borda Institute, which are not used in decision-making in any parliament anywhere, which is crazy. So I'm now going to talk about the border system, and if you have 5 options, then if somebody comes along and he is a bit intransigent and he wants his first preference, and he gives that one option his first preference, and that's it. He says nothing about the other options. Then his first option, his favorite option, is one thing, and the other options get nothing, because that's what he said. And if the voter casts 2 options, then her favorite gets 2 points, and her second choice gets 1 point, and so on. So if you want your favorite option to get the maximum number of points, the best thing to do is to cast all your preferences. And when you are considering a 5-option debate, or it is highly unlikely that you will regard one option as being very good and all the other 4 options as all being equally bad. So to have a voting system which allows a voter only one preference is to ask that voter to be inaccurate about his point of view. And if every voter is giving an inaccurate assessment of their point of view, then sure enough, the collective will also be inaccurate, as we have just seen. So this is the way the modified border count works. So I'm now going to have a look at Brexit, which was, as I say, a nonsense. And I put out a press release in February 2016 to suggest that the referendum, which was still 4 months ago, that it should be not 2 options, but it should be 3 options, including these. But unfortunately, we only had a majority vote on one option, and it was, do you want to be in the EU, yes or no, for or against, black or white, no compromise. Because the British system can't cope with compromise. And sure enough, the EU lost. It was close. It was only 48%. So it's only 4 points short. But even so, it lost. But if we had had a 3-option debate, like this one, well, if we'd had a majority, yeah, go on. if we'd had a majority vote on being in the EEA, yes or no, then maybe that would have got 31%. The 52% basically against was probably split between EEA, European Economic Union, and oh, you there we are. Oh no, that's right. Yes, and can we stand again? Yeah, jolly good. No, back one. That's it. So the 52% who voted against the EU, and here I'm guessing totally, but I'm suggesting that they might have split 31% in favour of the European Economic Area and 21% in favour of the WTO. But they would have split.
Yeah, I think some of the pros who wanted to stay in the EU might have gone to EEA if they had a choice. Then have the options on it.
Yeah. I mean, I can only speculate.
Right.
Yeah. But suffice to say that if we had had a multi-option vote, the answer would have been different.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And if we had had a majority vote on the EEA, then it might have lost by 69%, or another majority vote on the WTO, that might have lost by 79%. And as Pliny the Younger would have said, if there's no majority in favour of any one thing, then there's a majority against every single thing. It's just a crazy way of doing things. Okay. And what we could have had, and what we should have had, maybe, well, you had the crazy situation in New Zealand in 1992. They were debating their electoral system, which is what you're going to do in a minute or two. And they finished up with 5 options on the ballot paper. And if you have 5 options, then you have probably covered most opinions. And people can vote in favour of this, or in favour of that, or in favour of something else, whatever. But if you only have 2 options, then some people are voting not in favour of what they want, but against that which they don't want. And you cannot logically then say that this is definitely the opinion of the political will. The phrase has been used so often. The other factor about the Brexit vote is when in New Zealand, and they had this 5-option vote, what they did initially was to set up an independent commission. The political parties were totally against this, because political parties, they like to control things. They like to say, it's this, yes or no. Whether it's Napoleon wanting to be emperor forever, or Hitler wanting his Anschluss, or there have been quite a few dictators who have used majority voting. Which we don't teach our children about at all. We just assume that majority voting is in. But in New Zealand, they had this independent commission, so people were making submissions, and they were having public hearings, and they were giving press conferences, and by the time the vote actually happened, people knew what AMS was. Now, if you'd asked somebody in New Zealand in 1990 what is AMS, they probably would not have known. But by the time the vote came, yes, they knew, and they voted, and sure enough, New Zealand now has a form of proportional representation. The UK had a vote on their electoral system in 2011, and I tried to persuade the Electoral Commission that it should be a multi-option vote, and they said no. So we had a choice of the alternative vote and first past the vote, neither of which is PR. So to give people that choice is a bit like asking a vegetarian, would you like beef or lamb? Everybody understands this in Britain except the Electoral Commission. It's crazy, really. So bad. But there we are. So I'm just now going to, for the late arrivals, can you just log in on your shoji? Can you just log into that address there? Oh, sorry, can you go back again? Not there. Yeah, that one. And full picture, please. Yeah, so if you log into that, and you have to.
可以点进那个网址吗？就是我刚去的，可以点进去。
Sorry, have you got a problem?
No.
Okay. Just to, in 2017, I left home, which is Belfast in Ireland, and then travelled across overland as far as I could. And it's amazing how every country that you come to believes in majority voting. And Northern Ireland, well, we had, as I'm sure you all know, we had 30 years of violence because of majority rule. And everybody says we should have power sharing, which is the opposite of majority rule. But they don't do it themselves, they just tell us to do that and carry on with their majority rule. And then came to England because of Brexit. I'm crazy. Then I came to Belgium, which holds the world record for what normally happens in a democracy is you have an open and transparent election. Jolly good. And everybody knows exactly what's going on. Jolly good. And then the newly elected MPs, they go into their parliament, and if nobody, no party or no obvious coalition has a majority, they shut the door, they draw the curtains, they go upstairs, and nobody knows what on earth is going on until maybe weeks, certainly days, maybe weeks, maybe months afterwards. They produce the rabbit out of their hat and they have a government. And Belgium, has the world record of 541 days, by which time, of course, it was almost ready for the next election. Then I went to Germany. It is quite incredible to think that in Germany, with its history of Hitler, who got into power democratically by a majority vote, it was a weighted majority vote, but that's how he did it. And now they have the alternative for Deutschland, and they still believe in 50% plus one. Quite incredible. Then I came down through Vienna, where they have, or they had, they've just changed it, but they had a situation where the Freedom Party was in government with more power than was its proportional due, because they have majority rule, and it's crazy. Then I came to the Balkans, where, and I quote from Sarajevo's newspaper, all the wars in the former Yugoslavia started with a referendum. Next stop was Turkey, and Turkey has the situation, as we all know, where the Kurds are in the minority. And therefore, because of majority rule, they will never, ever be in government. It's just like the Catholics in Northern Ireland. If you are a minority, then you've had it. Forget it, go away. Then I came to the Caucasus, which is a bit like the Balkans. And both of them are very similar to Northern Ireland, actually, but just much more complicated. And Northern Ireland is I think, the simplest intercommunal conflict on the planet. Whereas the Balkans and the Caucasus, the cockpits of history, life is much more interesting and complicated. But again, in the Caucasus, they had referendums all over the place. None of them helped anybody. Then I went to Iran, where they believe in majority rule. And they had 3 referendums. And the first referendum was in 1953 under Mossadegh. And he said, let's all be socialists. And 99% said, yeah, let's be socialists. Oh, jolly good. And then they waited for it. And then it was the Shah and he said, let's all be capitalists instead. So 99% said, yeah, let's be capitalists. And then along came Khomeini, And he said, let's be neither, let's be Islamic instead. And 99% said, yeah, okay, let's be Islamic. So it's silly, it means nothing. A majority vote, in many instances, identifies the opinion of the guy, it's normally a fella, of the guy who writes the question. Doesn't give you the will of the people. Forget that nonsense. Then I came to Ulaanbaatar. I had to fly because Turkmenistan doesn't like foreigners. And no, I just came across them. And Ulaanbaatar, then down to Kasha, and then Tuluban. So I spent a month in Xinjiang, which is just like Belfast. It's like Belfast was during the Troubles, during the 1970s. So you have police Land Rovers, wah, 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 the whole time. I just came around and tried to be crazy. And then every time you go into a supermarket and you have to stand like this and you get body searched and so on, just like Belfast. And where there is the minority, the Uyghurs, as you all know, and you probably know better than I do. But the Uyghurs weren't always in Xinjiang. They had been over here. And during the Tang dynasty, they were actually fighting with the Chinese. History changes and we move on. And now for anybody in the West to support the Uyghurs, because they are Uyghurs. But you have other minorities in Xinjiang as well, the Tajiks and the Kazakhs and the Hui. And are you going to give all of them referendums? And it's a bit, you know, the Russian dolls, and every time you take out a doll, there's another one inside. And it's crazy. And we started it in Ireland. When Ireland left the United Kingdom 100 years ago, then Northern Ireland said, oh, we're leaving Ireland, and we've been fighting about it ever since. And then in Yugoslavia, and when Bosnia, for example, leaves Yugoslavia, then Republika Srpska and Herceg Bosnia and they all won. And they referendums all over the place. Same in the Caucasus. Georgia comes out of the Soviet Union, so Abkhazia comes out of Georgia. And all of these situations, they all finish up with war. If there was to be a referendum in Xinjiang, it would probably be a bloodbath. And it is quite frightening to even think about it, actually. And then, then I came into China. I'm going to give you a little story first before I talk about China, because you know everything about China. But then I came back through the Trans-Siberian Railway to Moscow. And in the West, we think that we know, well, everything, actually. So if we think we know everything, that means other people don't know very much, if anything. Apart from Chinese, of course, who invented everything. But when Gorbachev came to power in 1985, this was great news. This was the end of the Cold War, so fantastic. And lots of experts immediately went over to Moscow to tell him what to do, because, well, he's a communist, he doesn't know what to do. So we told him privatization, democratization, and all these other issues. And as far as democracy was concerned, we said, okay, so you have to have elections, and then you have a parliament, and then you, as the president, you, the executive, you present legislation, and parliament will debate it and argue about it and blah, blah, blah. But eventually they take a vote. And if you get a majority in favor, then you can put that law into force. And the system, the English word, as you know, is majority rule or majoritarianism. So we were saying, Mr. Gorbachev, you need majoritarianism. But Mr. Gorbachev doesn't speak English, and therefore you have to ask your translator to translate it. So instead of Mr. Gorbachev, you need majoritarianism, the translator said, Mikhail Sergeyevich, Van Nuschen, you need. Does anybody speak Russian? Van Nuschen, Bolshevism. The word for majoritarianism is Bolshevism. So we were telling Gorbachev, you have to be a little Bolshevik. Quite incredible. Okay, back to China. And the world's worst example of binary politics, I think, is the Great Leap Forward. And as you know, in village tribunals, they were taking majority votes, which in effect were sentences of death. And it is quite incredible that we in the West should be wagging our finger at Beijing and saying you have to have majority voting. Just totally crazy. And then Taiwan, where you have got binary politics, it's green or it's blue, and you have first past the post, which is a little bit crazy. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to ask you to vote. And if we... Oh, sorry, yeah, that's the book about the journey and blah, blah, blah. But can we go to the other one, the other web page? And what I've done here is to draw up a list. I'm going to ask you to decide what do you think should be the best voting systems for Taiwan. And I've drawn up a list of 7 options, and I'm going to ask you to vote in your order of preference. But before you do, would anybody like to add an additional option?
What
And
do
this-
we want?
The question should never be option X, yes or no. It should always be a choice. Certainly when you come to something like electoral systems, where there are so many in the world, there are over 300. We can't vote on 300. So you draw up a short list, as in New Zealand. And here's a short list of 7. And I'm just guessing what might come up if you had something similar to what they did in New Zealand. But does anybody want to add anything else?
就是比例代表制啊那些。
And if not, I'm going to ask you to vote. And if you can go to your smartphone and you have used majority voting, which we don't teach our children about at all. We just assume that majority voting is easy. But in New Zealand, they had this independent commission, so people were making submissions and they were having public hearings and they were giving press conferences and by the time the vote actually happened, people knew what AMS was. Now, if you'd asked somebody in New Zealand in 1990, everybody understands this in Britain except the Electoral Commission. It's crazy, it really is, it's just so mad. But there we are. So I'm just now going to, for the late arrivals, can you just log in on your Shoji, can you just log into that address there? Oh, sorry, can you go back again? Not there yet. Yeah, that one. And full picture, please. Yeah, so if you log into that, and you have to... Sorry, have you got a problem?
No.
Okay. Just to, in 2017, I left home, which is Belfast in Ireland, and then travelled across overland as far as I could. And it's amazing how every country that you come to believes in majority voting. And Northern Ireland, well, we had, as I'm sure you all know, we had 30 years of violence because of majority rule. And everybody says we should have power sharing, which is the opposite of majority rule. But they don't do it themselves, they just tell us to do that and carry on with their majority rule. And then came to England because of Brexit and crazy. Then I came to Belgium, which holds the world record for, well, what normally happens in a democracy is you have an open and transparent election. Jolly good. And everybody knows exactly what's going on. Jolly good. And then the newly elected MPs, they go into their parliament. And if nobody, no party, or no obvious coalition has a majority, they shut the door, they draw the curtains, they go upstairs, and nobody knows what on earth is going on until maybe weeks, certainly days, maybe weeks, maybe months afterwards. They produce a rabbit out of their hat and they have a government. And Belgium, has the world record of 541 days, by which time, of course, it was almost ready for the next election. Then I went to Germany. It is quite incredible to think that in Germany, with its history of Hitler, who got into power democratically by a majority vote, it was a weighted majority vote, but that's how he did it. And now they have the alternative of Deutschland, and they still believe in 50% plus one. Quite incredible. Then I came down through Vienna, where they had, they've just changed it, but they had a situation where the Freedom Party was in government with more power than was its proportional due, because they have majority rule, and it's crazy. Then I came to the Balkans, where, and I quote from Sarajevo's newspaper, all the wars in the former Yugoslavia started with a referendum. Next stop was Turkey, and Turkey has the situation, as we all know, where the Kurds are in the minority. And therefore, because of majority rule, they will never, ever be in government. It's just like the Catholics in Northern Ireland. If you are a minority, then you've had it. Forget it, go away. Then I came to the Caucasus, which is a bit like the Balkans. And both of them are very similar to Northern Ireland, actually, but just much more complicated. And Northern Ireland is, I think, the simplest intercontinental conflict on the planet. Whereas the Balkans and the Caucasus, the cockpits of history, life is much more interesting and complicated. But again, in the Caucasus, they had referendums all over the place. None of them helped anybody. Then I went to Iran, where they believe in majority rule. And they had 3 referendums. And the first referendum was in 1953 under Mossadegh. And he said, let's all be socialists. And 99% said, yeah, let's be socialists. Oh, jolly good. And then they waited for it. And then it was the Shah, and he said, let's all be capitalists instead. So 99% said, yeah, let's be capitalists. And then along came Khomeini, and he said, let's be neither, let's be Islamic instead. And 99% said, yeah, okay, let's be Islamic. So it's silly, it means nothing. A majority vote, in many instances, identifies the opinion of the guy, it's normally a fellow, of the guy who writes the question. Doesn't give you the will of the people. Forget that nonsense. Then I came to Uluwatu. I had to fly because Turkmenistan doesn't like foreigners. And it just became impossible. And Uluwatu, then down to Kasha, and then Tulukan. So I spent a month in Xinjiang, which is just like Belfast. It's like Belfast was during the Troubles, during the 1970s. So you have police slandering us, the whole time. I'm just going around and trying to be crazy. And then every time you go into a supermarket, and you have to stand like this, and you get body searched and so on, just like Belfast. And where there is the minority, the Uyghurs, as you all know, and you probably know better than I do. But the Uyghurs weren't always in Xinjiang. They had been over here. And during the Tang dynasty, they were actually fighting with the Chinese history changes and we move on. And now for anybody in the West to support the Uyghurs because they are Uyghurs, I suppose. But you have other minorities in Xinjiang as well, the Tajiks and the Kazakhs and the Hui. And are you going to give all of them referendums? And it's a bit, you know, the Russian dolls, and every time you take out a doll, there's another one inside. And it's crazy. And we started in Ireland, and when Ireland left the United Kingdom 100 years ago, then Northern Ireland says, oh, we're leaving Ireland, and we've been fighting about it ever since. And then in Yugoslavia, and when Bosnia, for example, leaves Yugoslavia, then Republika Srpska and Herzegovina and they all won, and they referendums all over the place. Same in the Caucasus. Georgia comes out of the Soviet Union, so Abkhazia comes out of Georgia. And all of these situations, they all finish up with war. If there was to be a referendum in Xinjiang, it would probably be a bloodbath. Actually. So if we think we know everything, that means other people don't know very much, if anything. Apart from Chinese, of course, who invented everything. But when Gorbachev came to power in 1985, this was great news. This was the end of the Cold War, so fantastic. And lots of experts immediately went over to Moscow to tell him what to do, because, well, he's a communist, he doesn't know what to do. So we told him privatization, democratization, all these other issues. And as far as democracy was concerned, we said, okay, so you have to have elections, and then you have a parliament, and then you, as the president, you, the executive, you present legislation, and parliament will debate it and argue about it and blah, blah, blah. But eventually they take a vote. And if you get a majority in favour, then you can put that law into force. And the system, the English word, as you know, is majority rule or majoritarianism. So we were saying, Mr. Gorbachev, you need majoritarianism. But Mr. Gorbachev doesn't speak English, and therefore you have to ask your translator to translate it. So instead of Mr. Gorbachev, you need majoritarianism, the translator said, Mikhail Sergeyevich, you need. Does anybody speak Russian? Вам Bolshevism. The word for majoritarianism is Bolshevism. So we were telling Gorbachev, you have to be a little Bolshevik. Quite incredible. Okay, back to China. And the world's worst example of binary politics, I think, is a great leap forward. And as you know, in village tribunals, they were taking majority votes, which in effect were sentences of death. And it is quite incredible that we in the West should be wagging our finger at Beijing and saying you have to have majority voting. Just totally crazy. And then Taiwan, where you have got binary politics, it's green or it's blue, and you have first past the post, which is a little bit crazy. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to ask you to vote. And if we... Oh, sorry, that's the book about the journey and blah, blah, blah. But can we go to the other one, the other web page? And what I've done here is to draw up a list. I'm going to ask you to decide what do you think should be the best voting systems for Taiwan. And I've drawn up a list of 7 options, and I'm going to ask you to vote in your order of preference. But before you do, Would anybody like to add an additional option?
What
And
is
this-
that?
What might come up if you had something similar to what they did in New Zealand. But does anybody want to add anything else? And if not, I'm going to ask you to vote. And if you can go to your smartphone and
Well, the countries are examples.
sorry,
The countries next to the vote are examples of countries that use that system. You see that first past the post, Taiwan and UK, US.
yeah.
Yeah. But then Taiwan's also got the parallel system.
Well, Taiwan has quite a few systems.
Right, so that the parallel system is for the legislative election.
Yeah,
And then the first past the post is that.
that's PR. Taiwan has the main electoral system in Taiwan is first past the post,
Yeah, with a PR, with a PR.
which is non-PR.
Yes. So Taiwan has a parallel system.
But sometimes you use
Yeah.
PR list.
PR is for political parties.
Yeah.
Vote.
Yeah.
And the first one, first past the post is during the campaign, the election, direct election.
Yeah, I know Taiwan has like both you have two votes, right? Parallel, so it should be parallel voting.
That is correct. Can I connect to the website?
Oh dear.
I have the problem.
Yeah.
Can I be
It's a
displayed?
little bit late, so you can to show about that.
Address.
刚开始来，
You have to create your
You have to create an account.
you have to create your account.
哦，OK。但是它的那个网址我都连不上去。
哦，真的吗？
对。
Oh, you've got it.
Because
最后
Sorry, I've got my big glasses on.
the BOR
DVOR
DAVOTE. Your favourite gets 7 points, and if you vote for only one option, then your favourite gets only 1 point.
So you just why Peter always argue with the majority party.
My account's been blocked. When I try and log in, it says my account's been blocked.
I don't know what you've done wrong.
Must be.
Yeah.
Using the account process, not inaccurate.
You're on Wi-Fi, okay?
Yes. It's not been accurate.
Okay, I have just written to the press in Ireland. When the Belfast Agreement was signed, they said that there was going to be a referendum sometime. And basically what it said was it will be a two-option referendum. Do you want a United Ireland? What does a United Ireland mean? I mean, does it mean a federal Ireland, or does it mean a totally unitary state with nothing to the north, or does it, what is it? They haven't said that. It's just going to be a vote, a United Ireland or stay in the UK. And the Secretary of State is bound to, the wording is shall. When she realises that there is a majority in favour, then he or she will say, okay, boys and girls, we have a referendum. And it's 50% plus one, of course. So when it gets to the stage, and the demographics are changing, lots of Protestants are leaving, lots of Catholics tend to have slightly larger families. They used to be terrible, but it's now different. So it does get to the stage where the Catholics might be in a majority. And they could be 50% plus one. So they have a poll, and 50% plus one, that's it. Unless, of course, somebody goes bang, bang, and it's 50% minus one, and it's called a peace agreement. It's dreadful. But now, with Brexit, you have the situation where lots of people, some people are motivated by their heart, quite a lot of people are motivated by their pocket, and the financial situation. Brexit is going to have economic repercussions, which are mostly going to be negative, and the number of people who are supporting a united Ireland is increasing, including quite a few Protestants. So there will be a vote at some stage. If it is a binary vote, yes, no, Protestant, Catholic, black or white, then it could be dangerous. If it is a multi-option vote, and I'm arguing that it should be, as I always have, and it should be, yeah, do you want a federal Ireland, or do you want a rural, or do you want a, what about an Anglo-Celtic federation? Where we're all, I mean, if you go to the Low Countries, and Belgium and the Netherlands and Luxembourg, they've all come together. If you go to Scandinavia, they've all come together. Why can't we come together? It's crazy. It could be a wise idea. Wales, Ireland, Scotland, England. W-I-S-E. It's there, sitting in front of us. All we have to do is to put it on paper. And if you had that option on the ballot paper as well. But if it's a two-option vote, wise will never be there at all. But if it's a multi-option vote, then there is a possibility. And if it's a preference vote, then, yeah, I like to think that it might actually come out on top. But persuading the politicians and the Electoral Commission that multi-option voting is possible, and we have, I've just written to the leader of the Green Party actually, we have Greta Thunberg asking politicians to believe the science, and I've just written to the leader of the Green Party saying, please believe the science of voting. But most politicians do not know about Borda and and quite a lot of other things about paradox and all that sort of stuff. They just have never studied voting theory. And nor had I when I first started in politics.
If there is a black and white vote, like Ireland or UK,
That's as it stands at the moment, yeah.
sounds very likely form.
I'm afraid it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what would you predict the result?
Oh, United Ireland. A United Ireland. Yeah. If they have a vote.
Just because of Brexit?
The change was happening anyway, but Brexit has made it accelerated it. And the reason why the DUP voted to leave.
Voted to leave?
Yeah, they voted no.
Yeah, they voted
Everybody else voted to remain.
What do you mean?
But the DUP, they are sectarian. They don't like immigrants. They don't like anybody who is not one of them. They don't like Catholics. They don't like anybody who is different from them. So they voted to leave. But everybody else was voting to remain. The chances, what might happen now as a result, as you know, Scotland also voted to remain
Yeah.
by a massive majority. And the Scottish Nationalist Party is now massive in Scotland.
Yes.
And if they have a referendum, then they will probably leave the United Kingdom. In which case the United Kingdom is not united any longer.
Yeah.
In which case, if you don't have a union,
You will have whites.
if you don't have the noun, you can't have the adjective. So the unionist in Northern Ireland is then obsolescent, if not obsolete, if not dead. So The Brexit situation means that even in Ireland as itself, as it stands, without taking Scotland into consideration, Ireland is now more likely to become a united Ireland. But given the fact that Scotland as well will opt out of the United Kingdom, then you will have little Englanders enjoying whatever they think they are enjoying. It's so crazy, it really is. And they're all, as I'm sure you know, obviously, it's the old people, people as ancient as me, who are
Over 45, not so old.
My nephew is, he lives in Germany, and his wife is Swiss, and he was arguing with his mother and father, his father was my brother, saying, Mum and Daddy, what about me, your son? Mum and Dad voted to leave, yeah. And I have a cousin in Cambridge, and he's a lecturer in Cambridge University, and he voted to leave. And you've got lots of intelligent people. Well, they think they're intelligent anyway. Lots of them voted to leave.
Yeah, actually, because having a referendum has to be approved by Johnson government. And Johnson already rejected the proposal of a referendum on Scotland's future. So Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
So he probably will also reject.
Oh, totally.
Yes. So that couldn't be happening, right, under Johnson administration.
No, if Johnson is now, as I was saying earlier, I think he should be banned from public office for what he did 3 years ago, telling lies and it's dreadful. He has one thing in his head, and that's ambition. He doesn't have brains, and he doesn't have ideas, and he doesn't have policies. He just has ambition. And he wanted to be Prime Minister, and now he's got it. And he actually, I don't know if you know this, but he actually produced a paper arguing for Britain to stay in the EU. In favour. And then he realised, if he's going to become Prime Minister, it would be better to be anti. So he changed his mind. Purely for ambition, not for any other reason at all. Lock him up. It's dreadful, it really is. But also you have the crazy situation where he has now got what he says is a majority on a minority of the votes. The majority actually support Remain, but he is going to just barge his way through and leave. My hope is that in about 20 years' time, Britain will be back in the EU.
In 20 years' time?
Yeah. I don't think it's going to happen. It'll take that length of time.
We hope sooner.
Well, it would be nice if it would be sooner, because then I might live to see it.
Need some more referendum. Northern Ireland is quite criticized, very heavy criticized towards Johnson.
Everyone criticized him, but still voted for Johnson.
Well, that's because of first past the post.
Yeah.
And because the Brexit Party then opted out. Have you got can you go to, this is it, isn't it? Can you go to, be used in parliaments? I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of the British House of Commons when they vote. It takes them 15 minutes sometimes, and they stand and they go through this door or that door, and somebody is sitting there with an abacus counting them. It is so primitive as to be almost unbelievable. But with electronic voting, you can't have multi-option voting if you're raising hands or walking through doors or whatever. But with electronic voting you can, and once the computer is inside the parliament, and I think it should be inside every parliament, and every member of parliament has got their own little smartphone and computer and laptop and God knows what else. So why can't they use a more accurate methodology? And the other point about the modified border count, it is much more accurate than any majority vote. Quite a few systems are more accurate than majority voting. But the modified border count is actually non-majoritarian. It measures, at best, it identifies, the option with the highest average preference. And an average involves everybody, not just a majority. So if the world adopted the modified border count as their chosen methodology, it would be the end of majority rule. So Mr. Trump would have to share power with Hillary, whatever her name was, and Boris Johnson would have to share power. And if there was no consensus for any policy, then there would be no decision taken on that policy. And you work until you get a consensus. And this is what we do in society, it's what we do at home, it's what we do everywhere else. But not in politics.
Would the argument against that be that you might end up in a situation like Belgium or where the government for 2 years, or Northern Ireland where the assembly is still...
Belgium, the continent of Europe is much better at coalition government than we are. I mean, Britain is they say it's the mother of democracy. It's the grumpy old granddad, if you ask me. And in Europe, on the continent, they manage coalition governments much more easily. If they didn't actually have majority rule, but had all-party coalition, so not just a grand coalition, but all-party coalition, the continental Europe would probably manage it. The Swedes and the Norwegians and the Scandinavians, they would get it, no problem at all, because they do this pretty well anyway. It is perfectly possible to do things this way once you've laid down the rules saying that democracy is for everybody and not just 50% plus one. It's a question of democratic rights. And this is the other argument that we use, is that the lawyers of this world should be much more specific when it comes to human rights legislation. And they should be saying that, I mean, normally if you look at the UN Charter, it's half a little paragraph. They say elections should be free and fair, whatever that means, which they don't define. And they say nothing about decision making at all. That's just not good enough.
How about Northern Ireland? The assembly still not back, still not up and running?
No, it's not yet.
So then there's the forcing for the system in Northern Ireland where both communities have to agree to everything. Is that another one? Again, it's something that I've written about in Northern Ireland. But when we have an election, some people vote, and if some people don't vote, well, that's a pity, but never mind, because people sometimes abstain. And it should be the same way that when you get to the Northern Ireland Assembly, and when they elect their executive, and if some people want to abstain, well, okay, that's a pity, but never mind. But for God's sake, the people who abstain should not have a veto on the whole caboose. But that's what they have at the moment. And it would be quite easy, what it would mean a change to the Belfast Agreement, of course. But otherwise, it would be quite easy to get the whole thing sorted out, just by changing the parameters on which it works. But at the moment, they won't. And it's masochism. I mean, you create the definition of a Chekhov play. If you see a pistol on the mantelpiece in Act 1, somebody will use it in Act 2. And if you have a system, as in Belfast, as in the Belfast Agreement, where they give a veto to both sides, then one side will use it, sure enough, in Act 2. And we are now in Act 2. And there's no prospect of Act 3 yet. So is there a prospect of resolving this soon?
Sorry?
Is there a prospect of resolving this soon? It looked like it was going to be solved and the DUP changed their mind and bought cold fees or something.
The DUP are now, they're
on the decline. Partly because, as we were saying a moment ago, they, lots of people think according to their pocket rather than anything else, and lots of people in the business community have seen that, okay, let's go to the United Ireland. And let's not go for this old-fashioned 17th century sectarianism. So the DUP is in trouble. And how they going to sort it out, I don't know. Quite honest, I don't really mind. I mean, they are sectarian. It's a very sectarian party, and the sooner they come to their total terms, the better. And it was appalling that the British government should actually have allowed the DUP to be in government with the Tories. I mean, that is just diabolical nonsense when parties that are much bigger, the Liberal Party, the Scottish Nationalist Party, Lib Dem, blah, 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 they're all much bigger than the DUP. They have nothing, and the DUP is sitting and roasting its feet.
But they played it very badly. They ended up with nothing.
Well, yeah, they shot themselves in the foot.
To these people here, why in continental Europe is so popular promotion system?
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Why these people want to get into some system into this?
Britain, there are, now that Brexit has happened, or is just about to happen, there are quite a few people in Britain talking about reform. Reforming the electoral system, reforming the House of Lords, reforming blah, blah, blah. Hardly anybody is yet talking about decision making. It's extraordinary. And you can have, they are blaming first past the post, and first past the post has been giving us distorted election results for longer than I can remember. And they're still talking about it. But unfortunately, the people who are the beneficiaries, they're not going to change it. And either it's going to be like an independent commission, but to actually force the politicians to adopt an independent commission, that is the crucial question. And I can't see it happening, not for a few years, I'm afraid. And partly because of David Cameron's anti-vegetarian referendum. If that had been a multi-option poll, then Britain would have had would probably have got PR, and if it had got PR, it would have probably got a coalition government, and if it had got a coalition government, there wouldn't have been a Brexit vote anyway. So consequences of consequences. We make one bad decision after another. It's just masochism gone mad.
Any question? Please, or comment? For Peter.
When is Taiwan going to change its first past the post system?
Some people also
And when is Taiwan going to change its decision-making system of majority voting in Parliament?
So teachers always reading the Okay, if any no other question?
老师可以讲中文吗？
Please, yeah.
老师可以讲中文吗？
也可以的。
再请教老师一下，他在国外的国际的观察，对台湾的一些印象和观察，不知道。
How about you?
Oh, James.
Oh,
How about you? I mean, you mentioned Taiwan's election. Give some comment.
Well, my impression of the Taiwanese political situation is that, as you know, it's green and blue. You are a divided society. Hong Kong is blue and yellow, different blue, but again it's dichotomous, again it's binary. And in Taiwan, you're not fighting with each other, so thank God for that. But it would be so much healthier for yourselves and for for that matter. I mean, if you did have an inclusive democracy, it would be a shining example to Hong Kong. To persuade Hong Kong now, I mean, as I mentioned, I was there for a week just a couple of days ago, and I'm going back, and I'll be doing a seminar like this when I get back there as well. And yeah, Hong Kong is, as you know, it's dangerous. And it's partly because you have so many people squashed together. And in Northern Ireland we have Catholics here and Protestants there, and sometimes there's a wall between them, 10 meters high. That's crazy. But it means that from day to day, these people are not fighting because. But in Hong Kong, everybody is on top of each other, and you can't tell one from the other just by looking at them. And the chances of the spark just bursting into flames is really serious. And I've seen some of the, I mean, I was living in Mongkok, so right in the middle of things. Not a good idea if you want a good night's sleep. And I've seen some of the videos of the violence that has been going on, and some of the police brutality is shocking. And some of the protesters' violence is shocking. And it's amazing that fatalities have not been more serious, actually. So far they have been lucky, and it can only be lucky, it can't be anything else. But to have that situation and to not put the cap on it somehow, I published an article in South China Morning Post just a couple of days ago, suggesting that, yeah, binary politics is no good, not in that, certainly not in the Hong Kong situation. That they have to have power sharing, regardless of whatever election results. I mean, as you know, the Lake Coast having their elections in September, and ideally they should change their electoral system as well. But the other idea, and I gather Deng Xiaoping was talking about this in 1997 when they were discussing everything anyway. I'm suggesting 50 years for China is nothing. England just wanted to get an agreement done, and so they could go home. And the fact that England, Britain did nothing in 100 years at all, and to then say, oh, we have to have democracy, for God's sake, I mean, a bit pathetic, really. But yes, one of the things that Beijing could do is to say, okay, well, let's have the one country, two systems for 100 years, not just 50. And as you know, most people who are protesting are young, because they know that they have 25 years in order to save what they've got, otherwise they might not have anything. So you can't blame them for protesting. You can blame them if they go violent. And of course, when you have those sorts of numbers, you quite often get a violent fringe, and they can mess things up, and that's what they are doing at the moment. So if the pro-democracy parties said, okay, let's have power sharing, and then if Carrie Lam said, okay, that's a good idea, and then if Beijing said, okay, let's have 100 years, then, and let's have well, you could even call it a patent commission, because he's got nothing to do. And you can ask Lord Patten to come back again and investigate the police. Or a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or to have something to, probably a Truth and Reconciliation Commission would be the best way of doing things, because it hasn't been only the police who have been banned. So there is a way out, and it can be done, but it has to be done very quickly. So the sooner the better.
谢老师，不好意思，我在你们之中加一个问题，也是要请教老师观察一下那个，台湾也是从威权转型而来的，到今天的民主的一个进程的阶段，再请教老师一下，老师的观察，在未来 DRC 中国大陆它是不是也会有机会走向民主，从事的政治改革？那么如果有机会的话，那香港目前的这个局势演变会不会是第一步？
有些他刚才跟我聊，
又回答一些了
也提到这个事啊，就是说，基本上他有关英国，这100年来，他应该比香港多一点，在民主化的应该比较多一点。他如果今天香港的实施自治制度更久，跟台湾一样，今天香港比较不会这样子，也就是台湾还是比较健全，所以基本上他也有一点点担心香港，但是他是对台湾比较大的信赖，他相信台湾对未来的香港跟中国大陆还会深的影响，那当然，老天要保佑台湾。南美不要走得太过分让它发展能够更深一点的确，他来台湾已经好几次了我们个人我是台湾就是还是要相信自己，但是呢，真的要打破这种政治的对立，要更多的经济社会以及更多政治民主发展的深化。我想应该会对未来的香港跟中国大陆会有更深远的影响，所以你要影响之前，不要自己先灭自己了，是吧？但是以台湾目前的发展的情况，我觉得还好。那我们是希望呢，这2个政党的年轻一代的，应该在这方面多关心一下，就是说要找出一些比较共同性的，跟世界能够有更多接轨的东西出来，不要太多只看到下一次选举，不要看到更多的未来的发展。
谢老师
，OK， 那个
现在不明白。
他会讲一点中文那中国大陆也混了一段时间，但是中文还是不行。有天你是第一，那时候。OK， 谢谢，我们谢谢 Peter， 好吧？谢谢各位，谢谢。